So good morning, friends. I would like to thank Scale and Celerity, first of all, for organizing this fantastic supply chain summit. It's a pleasure to have an august audience amongst us. And this panel, as explained earlier, we have a panel membership from different industries, which is a great thing to have. We'll have views from different people in this panel. The topic for us is to address, which is a very different topic. Supply chain traditionally has been seen as a cost center, driving efficiencies kind of a department. But how supply chain is playing a role in today's businesses, strategically driving revenue, driving growth. I think that's something that we'll learn from our panel today. We've also seen that post-COVID, the emphasis on giving supply chain more bandwidth in terms of operating, in terms of adding value, in terms of going beyond that cost-centric approach, I think, with board-level positions, et cetera, coming over. We are seeing a transition of supply chain from being a traditional department into a revenue growth driver for many organizations and companies in India and globally also. We see a lot of processes changing, like demand volatility, measuring end out of stock at retail shelves, etc., which contribute to this growth for many companies. I would like to share a personal example where we could be a partner in driving growth for a company. We work as 3PL and 4PL also. So as a part of 4PL, what we did was we did a network optimization and saw the opportunities for a healthcare company. We worked with them. Earlier, traditionally, the companies that operate in India, they operate by importing products or manufacturing products, selling it to distributors, and then to stockists or to, retail or end consumers. We worked along with them. We saw the necessity of reducing cost, but also increasing revenues. How we could do that was that we worked on removing the distributor layer from between, thereby saving cost, and giving a visibility of end consumer or the in healthcare patients in that sense. What consumption are they doing? Is the efficacy of the product that they are using is there? Is the dosage or the recommended dosage by the doctors is being consumed by the patients or not? So I think a lot of data visibility, real-time data visibility, and efficacy improvement led to a volume growth and sales growth for a company, because through distributors, they could not get this kind of data, and they were scattered and it was not standardized. So I think, this is a personal experience where we could add value in increasing revenue growth for a company. So the next 40-45 minutes to an hour we'll be spending discussing such kind of examples and such kind of processes that different companies are driving in today's era to drive growth. So I would start with Sudip. I think I would like to have your views on how can supply chain be a value creator and aid in revenue growth, especially in your industry, which is foods and beverages, because you've spent most of your time in food and beverages industry, where freshness and temperature control is key in today's way of doing business. And what are the projects that you are driving in your company that would result in a revenue growth driver strategically? Thank you.
Thanks, Chetan, for asking a very important question which is close to my heart. Most of us are working in the food and beverage industry, and therefore what Chetan that you talked about in terms of driving freshness is a very, very important competitive advantage to the organization. We all know that all functions plays a very important role in terms of the success of the organization. But I just want to ask you that which is one function which is having end-to-end visibility from the farm to fork? Is supply chain, right? Because we have the visibility in terms of what is inventory which is there with our customers' warehouse, at the distributor's end, at our own CFAs and the warehouse, in terms of our plant, what is the manufacturing plan, what is the transit time, and also in a lot of organizations, procurement is a part of supply chain. And therefore, at what cost we are buying and how much we are buying and when we are buying is having that visibility. And this unique feature of supply chain plays a very pivotal role in terms of driving a profitable revenue for the organization. And in order to tie up the entire end, one of the very important process that supply chain drives is IBP and SNOP, right? And generally, the maturity of the IBP process differs from organization to organization. In a lot of things that we talk about in terms of demand and supply, but if you really talk about the functional competitiveness of supply chain lies from the product management review to demand review to supply review to integrated review and also in terms of the MBR there. And although there are very, very important stakeholders who are leading these 5 steps of IBP/SNOP process, but there's a supply chain who, try to put all the strings together to drive the business rationale there. And if we are good in terms of driving that IBP process, a lot of alignment, a lot of, business decision that talks about that. And that drives in terms of improving the availability, reducing cost, improving profitability, and improving freshness. So according to me, that is the most, important process that a supply chain owns and drives that. Second thing is that because of the fact that we have got that end-to-end visibility, it is also a matter of that what kind of trade-off decisions that we are talking about. So trade-off decision is definitely in terms of the cost and service. We can have 99%, 100% service level at what cost? And therefore, what is that sweet point where we talk about that this is the service level that we can give it to our customers, and therefore at what cost? It's also important to have the trade-off between, particularly in terms of the freshness, Chetan, that you talked about, is in terms of the lot size versus freshness. And generally, there is a mindset that in manufacturing unit, we need to have a bigger lot size to improve the efficiencies and OE of the plant. But ultimately, those lot size, if the consumer is not buying based on the so-called the talk time, as we talked about in lean, then what's the point in having up that production in serving to our customers? Similarly, in terms of the procurement, if we are being, procuring that in bulk and the quality of the product is getting deteriorated, how it's going to help? So, that trade-off is extremely important. Third thing is in terms of having a CapEx versus ROIC, right? We can have additional CapEx and all, but as a business unit, how we are driving the ROIC, the return of invested capital in terms of drive the profitable growth. And the fourth point is in terms of the compliance and the flexibility. Generally, in terms of a traditional organization, be it talk about quality or be it talk about finance, we try to put a lot of stringent measures to ensure that, we are very safe in our own function. But the moment we see end-to-end business, what kind of delivery that we are giving to our customers, that is extremely important. We can be having a very stringent standards in terms of the release of product, which might take 4 hours, but is it really adding value? Or we are just, trying to do that. Similarly from the payables. A lot of, we all are working with a very reliable and competitive customers. But if, 5,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees payables are missing, we keep the product on hold or invoice on hold instead of doing that. So that becomes a very, very important role in terms of doing the trade-off for the organization. Third thing is the customer centricity, and that's the most important point in terms of driving the entire business. And we know the modern trade e-commerce channels is growing very fast, and we all are getting used to the fast service channels, in our day-to-day business. But for an organization, it's extremely important to have a collaborative projects with our customers. Extremely important to know the customers, because we know our customers knows our consumers. So therefore, it may be very suitable for us, a particular supply chain inventory model to serve to a customer, but it may not be that futile for the customers to the consumers. So therefore, for a customer, how many retail outlets they have, what kind of throughput they are having from the retail outlets, what kind of sale that is happening, and therefore what is the minimum lot size that we are giving to that customers. So we know the demand overall, but the customer knows our product's demand to our consumers. And therefore, it is extremely important to tie up the entire inventory modeling define in terms of the minimum lot size, depend in terms of the frequency of supplies, and agree on the minimum remaining shelf life to the customers. I think that important thing plays a very, very important role in terms of doing that. We can't be very circumspect and then having a very inward looking in terms of, what is good for us. But we need to be customer centric. We need to then connect with the customers. We need to see that, how we are doing, service to the customers and then agree on a common model. And most important thing is in terms of the automation. When we're talking about the flexibility, we talked about in terms of, we all have learned about the COVID experience and all. The more we automate, the more flexible and more efficient that we are. But also brings a lot of responsibility in terms of running that automation, be it in terms of the planning tools or in terms of running our automation in terms of warehouses and logistics, which Umesh has driven very nicely, or in terms of the manufacturing units. But more we do the automation, we need the scale, we need the competency of the people, we need the similarly kind of high quality and high reliable supplies to feed to these automatic machines, and therefore the entire bent of mind in terms of doing that. So that's extremely important. Coming to the point that what we are doing to improve that, definitely from our organization point of view, we are focusing more on the IBP, and more importantly from the short-term perspective and the SNOE process, where we can navigate this volatile demand, correct our entire supply chain, and then, plan to do accordingly. Second thing that we are doing in terms of the automation, and we have got a separate cell where we focusing on the automation in terms of demand sensing, in terms of, how can we get into the more sustainable way of doing business, which will be the future. It is the future for US and Europe, but it will be a feature for India, and that will be bringing a competitive advantage, and various other things in terms of the automation in terms of smart manufacturing in our manufacturing unit. And most importantly is in terms of, as I said, that how we can bring more customer centricity to the entire organization, not only from the supply chain side of view, but on manufacturing, in commercial and finance, so that supply chain being the front face to the customer. But then it is the onus of the supply chain to bring that insight from the customer throughout the organization, so that we work as one team to deliver high quality and fresh products to the customer. And when we're talking about automation, the temperature sensing, IoT, it plays a very, very important role in terms of maintaining the entire cool chain there, which anyway we are very much used to that. So just wanted to sum up the entire thing in terms of your question, that what is the relevance of supply chain in terms of the driving the revenue growth and the importance of freshness.
Thank you so much, Sudip. I think you've covered a lot end to end, where we can, see supply chain as revenue and growth drivers along being a cost center in the company. So that's very, very apt thoughts that you have put on the table. And picking up from where you had said that omni-channel, supply chains are moving to e-commerce as well as modern trade, general trade, quick commerce now. So, there are different channels which are open now. In this challenging era where D2C and B2C as well as, 10 minutes deliveries are now there, I think my question to Dharmesh here is, because you are into foods businesses, which has to be present in all these channels. So with these supply chains existing and our consumers becoming ever demanding on service, in your view, how is supply chain playing a role in these times to generate growth for your company? So what is the role of supply chain in these channels that we are going through?
Right, Chetan. So good question. And in fact, we are seeing actually a very explosive growth in the quick com. And today's modern consumer, they don't want to go out. They want everything, coming at home and at a speed. They don't want to wait even for an hour. And we are into the snacks category. Agro popcorn is a famous popcorn brand. And the consumers, they want it immediately, within 10 minutes, 12 minutes. So that's how we are seeing the growth in the quick com channel, very, very explosive. And in fact, we are finding, and it has all happened in last 1.5 years, where actually multiple applications have come, multiple companies have come, and then they are actually driving the growth. Few things very distinctly what we are seeing is that we have been having the GT, general trade, which is already there. And that was also growing at a speed, I'll say at a medium speed. And over a period, we have built that supply chain. And we have made it efficient. But now what we are seeing is that QuickCom, after coming QuickCom, there is some change, some transfer also from one channel to other channel, some sales is shifting. Other thing what we are seeing is that the consumption patterns are changing. And the products are also changing because the QuickCom sells are different. Mostly it's a higher MRP products which are there. And there is a different, the trade terms are there. So it's a set of products which are different. So we are suddenly seeing the products which were not selling earlier or some flavors which were not selling earlier are selling very fast actually, and there is explosive growth in those products. So, and we were not prepared for that. So there was no forecast for that. And we are finding now that it's a challenge for the manufacturing as well as for the supply chain also. So in the category where there is explosive growth is there, the first priority for the supply chain is to service and not looking at the cost at the moment. Yes, cost is important. Efficiency can be built. But what we are doing is that we have to somehow service it. Don't let the fill rates go down. And it has to be seen as an investment because there is always a pressure on the supply chain to reduce the cost. And the way we are spending in media or we are spending in building, then the factory capacity, similarly, some spending has to happen on the supply chain, building the supply chain. And that's what the discussion goes on in the company, that yes, right from the day one, you cannot have the efficiency built where you are having explosive growth. First priority is that build the business, get the consumers, more consumers, and sometimes I have to supply instead of the most optimum factory, I have to supply from other factory, spend some more money on the freight, but get those consumers, get those products to the consumers, so that we are able to build the growth, we are able to build those business, and later on, once actually we have made it, we have built the business, we understand what are the products, what is the requirements, what is the quantity, we will be able to have a better forecast, and then after that we can build the efficiency. So my take is that right from the day one, when there is a business is growing, you should not look at the building the efficiency. Efficiency will come later on. We can have a better supply chain model. Supply chain leaders will have to look where, they'll have to clearly see where they can build the efficiency, where the business is, that's there is a forecasting, you can do better forecasting, there's established. For us, for example, general trade, which is established business, so we have brought a lot of efficiencies in the last few years. But the new omni-channel, new QuickCom, which is it's a new opportunity for us. We are building right now, there is a capacity, we are building the supply chain. And once that is done, then there will be an opportunity for building the efficiency also.
Thank you so much, Dharmesh. There is a question, it's not my question, but it's from the audience, that after our finance minister had, announced some tax on popcorns, so what are your views? It's not my question, they all were asking, So Act 2 popcorn pe kya asar aaya?
So we got a free media through, then the whole... So a lot of people who didn't know about the popcorn, what kind of popcorns are there, which is, one is savory, sweet and all. So we got it free. And I don't know, there is that has an impact. But yes, there is a good growth is coming. So we are happy with that.
Good. Okay. I think coming back to, the revenue drivers, that supply chain leaders of companies that you are contributing to, I think, Umesh, I would like to ask you, this is something which we just touched upon, that in today's time and age, it is seen that many companies are growing in business and size and are keen to have supply chain on board so that when they achieve scale, supply chain can sustain growth and also be a growth driver in companies. So, what are your views, and you being on the board, how is it that supply chain is playing a role in growth driver? And this is a question after you, I will take it all to, because all are board members, and we have an independent director also on board now. Yes, Umesh.
Morning again. Good morning. So, I think supply chain is evolving, and there is still a lot of evolution pending. And this is in parallel to what direction industry is moving, what direction the government is moving. I can share a couple of examples of why supply chain is beyond cost kam kar do, target meet kar do, BP nahi ho raha, AOP nahi ho raha. It is much beyond. Even when I take interviews of people, I ask them, you have to choose as a logistician or as a supply chain expert between cost and service in your daily decisions, right? You have an order, you need to spend more on the order. Would you want to spend it or not? How would you choose between cost and service? So what's your job? Is it 50 service, 50 cost? And according to me, it's 60% service and 40% cost. Again, all of this depends on what environment you are in, which country you are in, how is the market, is it developing or is it underdeveloped, or is it cruising at about a 2% growth like a Europe or a US? In a market like India, where SKU proliferation is high, customer awareness is high, growth is high, our GDP might touch the target our Prime Minister wants very soon. So with that kind of growth, how exactly would you strategize supply chain only stuck to cost is something very difficult to imagine. So it has to be more service and then cost. For example, a supply chain board member would want to decide on technology and automation, thinking future forward. The future, let's say, for example, warehousing is automation. How would you do ASRS? How would you do a solution which is highly capital intensive, but it makes sense from a future standpoint? So would you want to wait for the future to come, or would you want to pull back the future right now? Let's say a supply chain board member decided in my earlier organization, and they went for ASRS in one of their sites, which was a mega site. After 2 years, COVID came in. And we all have experienced it was so difficult to get people to come to serve for picking, packing, loading, unloading. But this ASRS kept on running non-stop. The retail kept on sending orders, and everything was perfect. You were able to even maintain a market share in an environment where people are not available literally to do the job. It came out to be very, very strategic, and it became a case, and we got license of increasing from 1 to 6. And that's exactly what was explained earlier. Last year, HCCB launched a Telangana ASRS warehouse after 6 attempts to reach to a situation where a customer fulfillment warehouse became almost manless, 1 person per shift, which would have ideally required 350, 400 people in 3 shifts. It still does about 350 shipments per day. About 210 SKUs, 45,000 storage of pallets, highly scale operation, but you enter, you don't see people. You see machines talking to each other, and still that gives a payback. Second example, how supply chain can create a differentiator and add revenue and add business value is again palletized transportation. You guys might be aware of the brand Kinley. It has the lowest preform in the world almost. And that happens because nobody touches the case from the end of the line till the shelf. It's all end-to-end palletized. The model was created in such a way that the distributor would order a pallet, the production will be a pallet, the storage will be pallet, loading will be pallet, unloading will be pallet. Eventually it goes to the store, only then you open it up and you put it on the shelf. And that creates a value driver. It's I can't share much right now, but it's a very productive kind of a solution which made a difference in the catalog completely of how do you look at water distribution. Water is, of course, very thin margin product available. So the solution was created with, of course, a partner called Leap, where we had belts and wedges in the whole trailer distribution, which protected the load from any secondary damage and ensured that it reaches properly also to the customer. So solutions is something which will come from the macro environment you are into. Step one is how do you strategize? And step two is, of course, how do you meet the customer requirement, the customer demand at a cost. So cost actually does not come first. That's how the sequence would be, at least according to me. And I think that awareness is increasing at a very rapid pace. Given the kind of value addition supply chain directors have been adding to value in terms of revenue, throwing ideas on the table. And that seat on the table is getting more and more, I think, cemented and should grow even better.
Yeah, I think, we've seen lately and in the last 5 years that supply chain is getting that recognition and board seat. And Venu, I know you would like to add to this, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, so, Chetan was looking at me smiling. Why? Because I am on the board of directors as an independent women director of a snacks company. And as I am seeing, that's the requirement, especially companies which are, FMCG kind of product companies, they want more people on their board who have a supply chain proficiency. So to this question, and I wanted to address this, supply chain as a strategic revenue driver in a different way. Because if you will notice my company name, does anybody know what Altius Infra do? People, no, not you, Himanshu. Okay? Does anybody know what Altius Infra do? And what am I doing in that company? So just to let you know, Altius Infra is the largest telecom passive infrastructure provider in the world now. And they set up towers, mobile towers. So you are getting signals on your mobiles is because there is a mobile tower nearby, and in which Airtel or Jio or Vodafone, or if you have BSNL also, have put their active equipments, and you are getting the signal, and that's why we are able to connect. So the company Altius Infra, they set up mobile towers. Even if you look at this hotel, if you are getting connection inside in spite of all these walls, that's because there is an in-building solution here, which is related to fiber and all the radioactive, and you can see out here the radioactive antennas which are there. So my company does that. Now, that is where interesting, and I will maybe, my experience, I have, and how many of you have ordered from Blinkit, e-commerce? All of you, right? So what happens if you don't find a product on Blinkit? If you are looking and you go in Blinkit, again Blinkit wants 8 minutes delivery, 5 minutes delivery, that means you have a need of that product. It's like instant urge or instant demand. You don't find it. What do? So I wanted a chips ka packet. Let's say I wanted an Act 2 popcorn. I go to Blinkit and I say Act 2 popcorn or milta nahi. What do we do? Go to Zepto. Zepto pe bhi nahi hai. What do? Would you stop eating that, or what would you do? You will do that? Walk to the shop also? Very good. Then you are not an e-commerce customer. Because you are ready to expend energy and go and walk. That brand loyalty is very high. Congrats, Dharmesh. Huh? Okay. You want to eat Act 2 popcorn only. So brand loyalty is very high. Normally, that's not what happens. So if you are looking for a Coke, if you don't find Coke on the Blinkit or Zepto, then you may say, okay, let me take Pepsi. Right? Yeah, I can say that now because Umesh has moved out, otherwise he would have killed me. Why I'm saying is, so there is this concept of out of stock, retail out of stock. So if you think, if you wanted something on any of these quick commerce sites, or let's say you moved to the store and you didn't find Act 2, sorry, your supply chain is very bad. But the thing is, you have lost a customer. So there was a quick gratification which was expected by a consumer, and somebody walked over, looked at Blinkit or the shop, and you didn't find a product, and the sale is lost. That is called retail out of stock, right? So my experience, first experience with Procter & Gamble, where it was ingrained in me saying, you cannot have retail out of stock. Why? Because millions of dollars are spent on marketing to get the consumer to the store to buy the product. And if the product is not there, my millions of dollars which was spent on marketing is wasted. So from there, if you see, if you have an out of stock, your consumer is not buying, you have revenue loss, right? So supply chain as a strategic revenue driver, if you don't work on reducing the out of stock, be it at the store, be it on Blinkit now, or e-commerce platforms, you are losing consumers. So there was a research and we were discussing on data. They said 4% out of stock links to 1% revenue loss. I'm saying in e-commerce world that is not the case, because e-commerce people are looking for instant gratification. If I'm not getting a chips packet of Lay's, I may buy some other company's chip packet because that is what I wanted in 8 minutes. So I have a pack loss, a revenue loss. And that is the revenue loss which only supply chain can address. Sales cannot address, nobody can address, because we are in the business of getting the product. This is a very stale definition, but supply chain is all about getting the product at the right time, at the right place, in right quantity and right quality. MRP is fixed, so price is fixed, right? But if you look at now, so that is FMCG. Then I moved to another company called Kohler, where the consumer comes to buy the product only once in 10 years or 5 years. So the consumer, so every effort had been made to get the consumer and choose the product, because there is designing, there is a lot of other considerations which are there, not just instant gratification, but ye sanitary wear product mere ghar mein acha lagega ki nahi. The consumer came and wanted that particular design, and design is not there. You have lost that customer for 5 years. So that's again a revenue loss which has happened completely. And I would call that loss of out of stock as a revenue loss for full time, right? So supply chain again has to look at, and as Umesh said, 60% service, 40% cost consideration. Like in these cases where, you will lose the customer immediately and the MRP is fixed, you would give more preference to service. Let's get the product at the place, because MRP is fixed, the consumer will buy, and cost dekh lenge. So this thing increases. Then I moved to this company, which is Altius Infra, is to infrastructure company. B2B. There is no consumer, right? And I have very limited customers. So what happened for me, if you look at, if my tower stands, then 40 years the OpCo company is sitting on that tower. So I don't have an issue of losing consumer. What do I have is the cost pressure, because that is CAPEX. I cannot buy a tower and keep it in my warehouse waiting for the customer to come in. But when the customer comes in, I need to supply the tower as soon as possible so that the revenue starts coming in. Because the customer pays you on a monthly basis. So it's a revenue to OPEX model, right? So again, as a supply chain, as a revenue driver, I have to drive how do I deliver a product which I cannot keep in the warehouse, has a lead time of like, let's say 12 to 13 weeks, but I am able to deliver to the customer, set up the tower in 30 days to 45 days so that the revenue starts coming in. So different drivers in different industry. If you will look at supply chain, it is all about reducing out of stock. Out of stock to the consumer or internal out of stock so that you can start getting, revenue faster. So whoever says that supply chain is only a cost driver doesn't look at this. Like the example which I quoted for Earlier, it was like 4% out of stock reduction if you can do, revenue increases by 1%. Though e-commerce, we need to do this study again. So, from a supply chain perspective, and that's what I'm saying, that focus on inventories, which Dharmesh talked about, or focus on service, focus on cost. B2B, CAPEX, there's a huge focus on, if I ask the proportion, 100% on cost. Service, I can delay the service, but there is a revenue pressure because the revenue will stop coming in. Will come in like, if I set up the tower today, then my revenue starts coming in from March. If I set up the tower in March, my revenue starts coming in April. So I'm losing that much revenue. So this kind of, if I look at the graph, service to cost, that's a decision which all supply chain professionals have to make. And that's where, whenever whoever says that you are only the cost center, you have to understand you are impacting the revenue by making the product available. So that's my 2 bits on it.
Very relevant thoughts, I think, Venu. It has intrigued everyone sitting here and everybody started to think in a different way, I believe. But as you said, to achieve that out of stock or stock availability, I would say, on the other side, at the retail or e-commerce platform, etc., there is a huge machinery that supply chain has to work towards achieving that. I think it starts from planning, and S&OP plays a very important role in that. And I think, Nitin, if you can, let us know how S&OP can be a revenue driver and aid this, stock availability at the market level, would be good to have your thoughts on this, please.
Sure. Thank you, Chetan. So firstly, I'll just take an opportunity to thank Supply Chain Tribe and Scale for having me over here. It's an absolute pleasure to be around with you guys. Also, just a minute introducing myself so that you know what I'm talking is coming from what background and experience. I've spent 25 years in the industry now. So formative 5-6 years in FMCG planning across Dabur, Gillette and PepsiCo. Then I switched industries. I went to retail. I was instrumental in setting up supply chain for brand KFC when it came to the country. So there I spent good 9 years constructing a vendor base and a distribution infrastructure which could cater to the growth journey from ground zero to 500 over those 9 years spent there. Then I've spent close to a decade now in leadership positions at Philips Lighting, erstwhile Philips Lighting, now called Signify. Then a brief tenure at Del Monte Foods. And then I've filled up at Kohler, where Venu has spent her previous stint. So all of this, what I talk today, is actually a culmination of whatever I have picked up in this long journey. So thank you, Chetan, for giving me my favorite topic, which is sales and operations planning process, and also called S&OP. May actually sound hackneyed because this has been there from, I think, ever since 1982, supply chain term got coined that S&OP process needs to be followed. To me, I'll just draw an analogy. I'm sure many of us sitting in this room have read through books of James Collins, which is Good to Great, Built to Last, How the Mighty Fall. There is, interestingly, my personal observation, what he talked of, one common thread which ran across is discipline. You see a lot of discipline, which is a common weave around all the companies which do well. And even in my 25 experience, I've seen companies who do the basic S&OP process well in supply chain are actually a much successful business model, better place for employees to be in, and actually a good setup for everybody. While the companies who do not are continuously on a chase, catching up, causing a lot of burnout in the process of resources, including employees, therefore producing that chagrin of being frustrated, moving out, etc., and that it becomes a downward spiral for them. So coming back to this, S&OP, I'll split into 2 key verticals. One, it is all about getting the planning right, which is demand. Now, and the other piece I'll pick up is then making a supply response to that demand, and therefore being proactive around whatever Venu talked about, being not out of stock in the marketplace. So if you look at the process itself, the demand planning process, where a supply chain leader actually should be spending half of his time, is getting the demand right, We know inherently in the process itself, there is a baselining, forecasting, which is nothing but algorithms which run for you, work on the history. Then there is enough which needs to be done qualitatively about demand generation, which is essentially pulling out of heads of people what's lying inside. So unless you create those platforms and forums, these do not come out still on their own. Very few processes are matured up where people stick to their timelines, share with you. So these forums you create, where you bring out what's in their mind in terms of new product initiatives, what are the market interventions. When you mix all of this, you create something called a strong enough demand. So now, when we bring all of these elements together, what we create, we call it an unconstrained demand. So, unconstrained demand, by name and definition itself, it's the max revenue potential you have mapped that you can actually achieve, whether it's a month, a quarter ahead, or for the year. So, you've set a goal for yourself that if I'm able to fulfill this, this is my maximum revenue potential sitting. So, now, how do you run to that goalpost is how good you are at responding to this demand. Because through our experience, all of us will agree, as much you spend time, demand is only 60-70% right. That's the best we are able to get to. Because of so many moving parts, it continues to move. So despite best efforts, I still need to create a supply chain which is able to respond to that moving demand. That's where what we call agility of supply chain comes in. Here, in my experience, what I have picked up, I'll just bullet them into 4 things. What is it? Those 4 pillars where you can build a good response to a demand. One goes back actually to basics, which is called rationalization or segmentation. Now, all said and done, we may talk, but the amount we spend on rationalizing our portfolios continues to be a challenge as businesses. Unless a supply chain leader is driving it, it doesn't happen, trust me. So it is not on anybody else's radar. CFO will only act reactive, he'll shout. But how can we be proactive about continuously churning out that bottom 5%, which is not bringing the desired revenue commensurate to the complexity which it adds to the system. So if you spend time on rationalizing and then getting your basics right, which is again what we are always taught, Pareto, 80-20, ABC. You get all of these things right. You have stocking norms which are commensurate to these. You have strategies of supply, which is how do you kind of hold more? Where do you hold more? Where all you can pass on the risk to the supplier more, which will be your runners, what you sell the most, because that they'll happily take the risk, but something which is tail, you will have to probably take that risk and have little bit of more, because also my supply chain response time will be much higher. So that's how you construct your portfolio, whether it is finished good, intermittents, or raw materials and components. So these theories actually I have seen it gets beautifully applied there. Secondly, I think you talked of localization in the beginning. In all my experience, I've always seen there is an opportunity to localize. Now that localize could be when you are bringing in a new business from outside, it could be from imported to indigenous, India made. But then as your business evolves, you might want to have regional. Thereafter, means if it's a manufacturing intensive setup like automobile, you would like to have your vendor base nearby so that you can work around on VMI. So this is something which I've always found helpful, that you can localize at various levels. And one concept which I actually read in case studies of Asian Paints of delayed differentiation at my NITI days, that is something I have applied twice in my career, and that helped. So delayed differentiation is nothing but a concept of, means how do you pack closer to the demand to the finished good, which goes. So I applied it in Duracell during my Gillette days. So we would import bulk and make 2s, 4s, 8s pack here. So that's like, if you import packs, then your agility to respond to fluctuations within SKUs is low. So this unlocks the capital out of working inventories, also brings in more service. Similarly, when I joined Del Monte, we used to import olive oil from Italy and Spain in the finished goods SKUs, which is 250, 500 or 100 ml or a liter, 5 liter, which actually had its own issues. 3 months of sailing time, so response was low. I moved the model to importing oil in bulk. So these were 20 metric ton containers which docked near Cochin. We had a packer there who converted these into SKUs. So we improved service. In the process, we also impacted cost because packaging material and labor costs are much lower here compared to an Italy or a Spain. So that worked. Last but not the least, I think that would get picked up again is network optimization. So there is always an opportunity. How do you want to kind of go to the market? So you keep changing that as per your demand supply model, that where are you making, where are you selling? So there is an ongoing opportunity to strengthen that as well. So that's all I had. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nitin. I think very relevant points that you've touched here. And I can also share some experiences around it that, late stage differentiation as well as, customization really helps in one case. And, we'll say that at one point of time when the volumes were low for 100 pipers in India, we used to import the product directly. But then we started to import the bulk into India at a central location in Goa. And from there it was then distributed. But the volumes today, if you look at, then they started growing. And we started bottling 100 pipers at different bottling plants near the customer. I think, that is something which is there. Talking about the out of stock, I see a lot of, in the healthcare industry, if you see the medtech space, there are, if you take an example of a stunt to be put in a patient, a heart patient, the hospitals don't buy and stock the product. There are 4 or 5 companies, people sitting or nearby having the consignment inventory at the hospital, and then they have to be present there because what kind of stent, what length of stent has to be put in is very different. So many SKUs on a consignment model at that point of time when the patient goes into surgery, that's the kind of, stock availability that we talk about, and supply chain enables that, So very different examples from beverage, liquor, alcohol beverage to healthcare, saving life of a patient. Application of supply chain being a revenue driver, through availability, through differentiation, through SNOP, etc., is huge. And I think it's a topic which, intrigues everybody sitting here. Today, the buzzword is AI, right? Right from Modi to Trump to Macron, everybody is talking about AI. Yeah. So imagine a deep sea, which was developed in China, could drive down value of NVIDIA by, it's really, amazing to see the kind of qualification of AI which we are using in our day-to-day life and how we will start to use in the next 5 years. The question is that. So the question to all the panel members here is, how will the adoption of automation and AI in supply chain in the next 5 years be? And will it help, save cost or increase revenue? I think we all are looking forward to hearing this from all you guys. Please. Anybody would like to, Venu, your thoughts on this?
Okay. So, as you rightly said that AI is the future in the sense, artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence from a chat GPT and a DeepSeek, it's a different platform. But at least for supply chain, I would say, and especially for the product companies, understanding what is the demand sitting there. And again, I keep, because, maybe my thinking is very simple. I say, what is the demand? If we can capture that demand, see, no company can cater to 100% of their demand. The supply chain cost of doing that would be exorbitant. So you decide, okay, that if I take a target of saying I need to meet the demand of my products 80%, 90%, but I have to achieve that 90%. And once I put that in, then AI becomes very useful, because AI in supply chain, as I have seen, helps you in demand sensing. What is the demand? Helps you in getting the macro variables also, macro and micro variables also. And then this whole, somewhere in the LinkedIn, I had written a note of saying fragile ego of a planner. I don't know, many of you may not have read it. Saying, as planners who plan for, and as Nitin said, first is to get the demand right. If you get the demand right, then supplying for the demand becomes an easier thing. But how do you get the demand right? To get the demand right, either you can do all the planning on Excel, or you can use machine learning and the artificial intelligence of all the data which is sitting there and do multiple complex variables analysis and get the right demand, and then trust the system that what system is given is the demand that you have to cater to, and by discipline get to serve that demand. You will see your revenue growth happening. So from a supply chain perspective, I would only say that AI, how do you integrate AI into planning is use AI, use machine learning, don't doubt it. And that's my thought.
Right. Thanks, Venu. Umesh, I think automation and AI is something which you have implemented all through. So what's your view?
So overall in supply, I think the first step, like I always say, is strategy. You should be very clear on what environment you are and how your strategy helps you prioritize what you need to do overall in supply chain. So first of all, I would say don't do AI. अभी भी लोग फोन पे ही हैं. I thought I will shock. अभी भी लोग फोन पे ही हैं.
Not today or not for next 5 years?
Don't do AI. Solve a problem. If AI helps you solve a problem, use AI. Don't do AI for the sake of it. कि ये तो वेनु बोल रही है do AI यार. चेतन बोल रहा था AI अच्छा है. People are doing AI. Let me also do AI. That is not how it will work. So it's important as a supply chain professional to be creative, to be aware of what technology exists and what it can do. Thoda philosophical ho gaya. So coming back to the question, where I think in the next 3 to 5 years this will evolve. First area I think in manufacturing is predictive maintenance. Repairs and maintenance would be an area which would undergo a lot of change. There's a lot of investment around it, and there's a lot of proven case globally that AI could predict a lot basis, vibration, motion, temperature, humidity, etc., many other sensors which are very easily, accurately available, which can predict a particular downtime, a particular repair on time. So that's, I think, one big area in manufacturing which should transformationally evolve. The other area is coming to S&OP. In a developed market where you grow at about 2%, it's fine because you get accurate forecast, you're able to predict better, you have more predictability in the market, in the consumer, in the behavior, in the category. But in markets like India, I don't think forecast is very relevant, at least from a tactical standpoint. So again, don't do forecasting. Do forecasting for long term. Do forecasting for capacity planning, for medium-term decisions. For tactical daily movements, I think it will be important how we see AI getting into demand sensing, getting into a lot of variables which can be caught, making your supply chain more theoretical. There was a lot of theory which we used to study, safety stock calculation, choose between upstream and downstream. If your source is in Gujarat, have everything upstream in Gujarat for servicing in East, and downstream for servicing in East, and upstream for servicing locations in Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, MP, and so on. So you can have maniacal discipline in implementing theories of supply chain to take care of the process which will move from push to pull, and use a little bit of tech on demand sensing so that you can respond better. But use S&OP, pre-S&OP for medium to long-term capacity planning, decisions on warehousing, decisions on network, decide where it is. The last piece which I see this will evolve more is networking. Network optimization, largely Venu in deep touched about Blinkit. You can't forecast you will need a battery tomorrow at 1 p.m. and you will order Blinkit. Blinkit can't forecast this, right? They'll just keep everything there. And wherever they'll keep it, the COG of network will keep on moving from pin code A to B to C to D and so on and so forth. So somewhere having mobility of that and having a proper network optimization using a lot of AI dynamically real time is something where it will evolve. So 3 to 5 years, I think this is where it will go. Beyond 5 years, there's a lot of AI being used on AMRs, on driving autonomously, on a lot of transportation, which we would love to get evolved, because the key driver of supply chain is the truck driver, right? So how do we move beyond that and solve that problem could also be something which we would be looking forward to.
Right. So, Nitin, yes.
So just wanted to add one point. So I agree and disagree both. When I look at it, the way I find some challenges is like my 40% demand is project-based, where no sort of intelligence can actually get applied. So it's only about a function of you won a quote, therefore it would translate into a sale over next 6 months, 8 months, 10 months. And second, our traditional channel B2C continues to be an issue in Indian companies where you don't have visibility in the trade. So what you're pushing as primary sale is what you have visibility to. And what resulted into that primary sale for that month, whether it was the month end, a rebate, or just the pressure, or the ASM's last month in the organization, those are very difficult parameters to actually rely on and then bring it. So I don't have any doubt on the your capability of AI, but how do I apply is my concern. Third field, which we haven't talked about, where I would jump and actually pick up if something is able to offer me a solution, is post-sales service parts. I'm in an industry, we live with the product for next 10 years. So any failures, we have to supply spares to our service teams, which also falls under the ambit of supply chain. So here, typically, this is the best model, where there is no intervention happening. I'm not even taking forecast from anybody. I'm free to generate my own forecast. So on a frantic lookout for algorithms which can give me these predictive analytics, where AI can probably help. Because here I need to be ahead of the game, not wait for parts to fail, then generate some data, basis which I take action and may not actually be true in the future. It has to be first few failures linked to particular FGs sold 5 years back with a batch information which is showing a failure. So how much of I sold of this, and therefore what is it that the requirement could be for this. That is where I would actually jump and take this kind of a solution.
Right. Thank you. Venu, yes? Yeah.
To Umesh's point when he says don't forecast, let me understand from him, because it's important, because what happens is at times people take away, and then tomorrow you will come to the company and tell your CEO, I will not forecast. And he will say, okay, you can go away, because as a supply chain person, you have to plan ahead. So you need a forecast. Now the question is, as per me, you don't forecast, meaning you don't spend millions and millions of hours just trying to get your forecast right. And that's what I said. You cannot meet 100% demand which is existing in the whole market for your product. But you need to say, okay, I need to meet this, and that is where the systems, what they are generating based on various variables, then the discipline of how you will ensure that you are not letting a ball drop on meeting that demand is the key thing. I hope you're not telling that don't forecast at all.
Please forecast. So I meant don't forecast daily.
Yes.
The daily level forecasting can move to a pull system, to an AI system, to a demand sensing system. Don't burn yourself to have 60% to 75% accuracy on a daily SKU warehouse level. That will not happen. In a growing market, it won't happen. It might happen, like I said, in Europe and America. Use forecast for medium to long-term capacity, etc. And it is also an indicator for you to plan other things like resources. So please forecast, okay?